All Tomorrows, a billion-year chronicle of the myriad species and mixed fortunes of man. Long ago, in the distant past, humans colonized Mars. It took centuries to terraform the red planet. First, they made oceans using the water from comets. Then they sent microbes to create breathable air, then introduced genetically modified plants and animals. It was only after Mars was transformed into a habitable world that the first people came to Mars in colony ships. So the first steps on Mars were taken not by astronauts, but by barefoot children on lush green grass. The people of Mars developed their own culture and identity separate to Earth. The low gravity made Martians tall and spindly, and they became almost a different species to the Earthlings. For hundreds of years, the two planets coexisted, but as Mars started to surpass Earth, tensions led to war. Interplanetary war wasn't glorious or exciting. There were no heroic pilots or massive spaceships. The war was fought by complicated, automated machines in a slow, strategic, nerve-wracking contest that caused unimaginable destruction. Billions of people died in the war, and humans almost went extinct, so the survivors of Earth and Mars united and made a plan to ensure this would never happen again. Humanity made massive reforms to their politics and economics, and they changed themselves. They genetically modified humanity into a new subspecies called the Star People, made to be better and smarter and adapted to expand into space. And it worked. Within a few generations, the unified Star People peacefully colonized the solar system. Other stars were too far away to fly to in person, so instead the Star People sent out automated machines that would fly to distant worlds and terraform them, then use genetic material to create people to live there. There was a weird problem with these colonies, where many humans fell in love with the machines that had created them, and died in mass identity crises. But the colonies that survived thrived, and expanded across the galaxy, starting a golden age for humanity. Trillions of people lived peaceful, utopic lives, their worlds united by communication across centuries of light. As the Star People explored space, they discovered some alien creatures, but didn't find any intelligent life. So they wondered, were humans alone in the galaxy? On one alien world, they found a fossil of a bird-like creature that didn't seem related to the other native life. The native creatures had 3 limbs and copper bones, but this bird had 4 limbs and calcium bones. It seemed related to an extinct dinosaur from Earth. So how the hell did this extinct Earth animal end up on this distant alien world? Some people thought God must have done it, and there was a resurgence of religion. But others thought aliens did it, that there must be some civilization out there who had spaceflight and bioengineering millions of years before humans even had fire. Humanity hoped that these aliens would be peaceful, but just in case, they built weapons to defend themselves. Weapons so powerful they could obliterate stars. But all of that was useless in the end. Humanity was attacked by a godlike ancient species called the Q. They were galactic nomads who constantly migrated through space, and they had a fanatical religious mission to remake the universe using genetic manipulation. So when the Q found humans, they didn't see them as people. They were just objects to be changed into whatever shape the Q wanted. Within 1,000 years, the Q destroyed human civilization. But some human species lived on, because the Q used their bioengineering technology to reshape humanity into thousands of bizarre subspecies. They made humans into tools, into pets, into wild animals. They ruled over the human worlds for 40 million years, and then they fucked off to find their next victims, leaving humanity divided and differentiated beyond recognition. These twisted species were the last remnants of humanity. On one world, where the husks of dead cities baked under a scorching sun, lived the worms. They were humans, but the Q had modified their hands and feet into tiny, feeble appendages, reduced their eyes to pinpricks, and removed most of their brain. All their lives, the worms dug aimlessly through the ground. If they found food, they ate it. If they found other worms, they sometimes ate them or reproduced. They were wretched, mindless creatures, but their humanity would eventually resurface. On another world were the Titans, who roamed a vast savanna. Their hands were clumsy stumps, but their lower lip was like the trunk of an elephant, and could be used like a hand. They were some of the smartest of the new human species, and gradually they achieved sentience. They built homes, agriculture, language, literature, made ornate wood carvings. In booming voices they told myths and legends of the bygone, half-remembered past. With enough time, these titans could have started a new humanity, but an ice age hit the planet, and these gentle giants disappeared forever. On other worlds, humans had been twisted into predators, looking like vampires and werewolves of myth, with sharp claws and killing teeth. Their prey were also human, made into herbivores with bird-like feet. The prey had the dull minds of animals, but the predators on the hunt kept some spark of human intelligence, which would eventually re-emerge. The mantelopes were bred to be singers and memory retainers for the Q, so they had fully human minds. They understood the world around them, but in the bodies of grazing herd animals they were powerless to change anything. So for centuries, mournful herds roamed the plains, singing songs of desperation and loss. They created whole religions and oral traditions around their grief and frustration, until gradually, mercifully, their agony faded. 'Cause evolutionarily, a stupid, simple-minded mantelope survives as well or better than a conscious, sad mantelope, so within 100,000 years, this melancholy world fell silent. Human minds aren't sacred to evolution, and soon only animals remained. The lizard herders were the lucky ones, because the Q wiped out their intelligence and stunted their brains so that they could never regain sentience, so they didn't suffer like the mantelopes did. The lizard herders survived in symbiosis with some herbivorous reptiles, and while the lizard herders stayed simple-minded, the reptiles evolved, slowly growing stronger and smarter. The Q twisted humanity into a variety of aquatic creatures. There were limbless eel people, and whale-like behemoths, and horrifying multitudes of brainless wallowers that served as food stock. Most of them went extinct when the Q left, but the swimmers survived, feeding on fish and crustaceans in their world's oceans. They didn't look much like humans, but human eyes peered through their blubbery eyelids, and they spoke to each other, though underwater they couldn't hear each other's words. The Tempters were so fucked up it's a wonder they survived at all. The Q made them into bizarre living decorations, 2-meter-tall cones of flesh like grotesque carnivorous plants. Those were the females. The males were mindless little monkey imp creatures who blindly served their queen, controlled by vocal and pheromonal signals. They'd gather the food and guard their queen, and occasionally they would mate by descending into this breeding tube like a subway commuter. It was weird, but it worked, and the Tempters' mound forests spread across their world. They could have built some kind of civilization, but they were obliterated by a stray comet, and one of humanity's best and weirdest hopes died out. The Bone Crushers looked like monsters, like giants or ogres with beaks derived from teeth. They only ate putrefying meat, and they communicated by defecating on each other. But they were actually pretty successful. They reached a medieval level of civilization, until they ran out of rotting meat to eat and eventually collapsed. When the Q attacked, most human worlds were quickly defeated, but one world fought back, resisting the Q 2 times before falling. The Q punished and humiliated this world for its resistance by making them into the colonials. The colonials were disembodied cultures of skin, connected with a network of basic nerves. The Q used them as living filtering devices, living off Q waste products. And for no other reason than to make the colonials suffer, the Q left them with their consciousness and their eyes, so that they could fully witness their own wretched fate. For 40 million years, the colonials suffered generations of misery, hoping for their own extinction, but they were made to be efficient, and so they spread across the planet in quilt-like fields of human flesh. The Q made lots of flying human species, some like bats or pterosaurs, others like angels or demons dancing through the ether, or strange, ugly creatures that floated on glands full of gas. One species, called the flyers, had a special starfish-shaped heart that processed oxygen so efficiently that they had enough energy to support flight as well as human-like brains. Other flying species weren't so lucky. The hand flappers had wings that were useless for flying, but also couldn't be used as hands. All they could do was flap about to display their sexual availability, and so they ecstatically flashed and danced their way to extinction. Some humans tried to escape the Q by hiding underground. The Q found them anyway, and made them into subterranean, mousy Morlock people called the Blind Folk. They used whiskers and long fingers and big ears and banshee-like screams to navigate in the dark. They lived off fungi and fish, and avoided predation by bats and crocodilian creatures. These albino troglodytes looked fairly human, but where their eyes should have been, there was nothing but haunting, smooth skin. Eventually, the movement of tectonic plates crushed these underground habitats one by one. On a planet with extremely high gravity, the Q made the lopsiders, flat, deformed, asymmetrical creatures right out of the fever dreams of Picasso, Dali, or Bosch. The lopsiders crawled along the ground on 3 hands, with another limb used as an antenna. One eye stared straight up, while the other eye scanned ahead. As wretched as they looked, the lopsiders thrived on their heavy world. They domesticated some native creatures, and began the long road to civilization. On a moon with very low gravity, the Q made the striders, enormously tall, thin creatures who walked among huge trees that towered like skyscrapers. The striders were very delicate, so even with low gravity, a fall could shatter their bones. The striders were eventually wiped out by a bunch of chickens who, over 2 million years, evolved into deadly predators. On another world, where the humans temporarily resisted the Q punished the humans by creating an array of parasites, who were also made from humans. There were tortoise-sized, vampire-like ambulatory parasites, and smaller parasites that lived attached to their hosts. There was even one horrific parasite that infested the wombs of its victims. Many of these parasite life cycles were so elaborate and baroque that they went extinct as soon as the Q left. But some of the parasites survived and developed a symbiosis that benefited their hosts as well as themselves. One human species evolved on a world of great archipelagos, calm, shallow oceans sprinkled with countless islands. The fingerfishers evolved to catch fish with their long fingers adapted into fish hooks, and ate them with long snouts full of needle-sharp teeth, and their evolution would get even weirder later on. The hedonists were created by the Q to be their pampered pets, living carefree lives of pleasure. Their world was a tropical paradise of succulent fruits and lakes of sweet bacterial juice. They were the only animals on their planet and had no predators or competition to deal with. Under normal conditions,